So, it's not a dominant narrative for the folks who are saying in the comments for any promotions around this South Africa journey. It's not a dominant narrative that like, what do the women in South Africa know about midwifery? For many of them, they're born into it. For many of the young schoolgirls, they come home and they know how to fetch the water and they know what herbs are needed and they know how to do the prayers and the rituals and they know how to count the moons and they know how to understand the earth as medicine and they know how to recover their mother or themselves from childbirth. So it's not entirely true that the South African woman knows nothing about traditional midwifery. But it's also not entirely true that traditional midwifery is the dominant modality for childbirth, um, medicine, and the reproductive spectrum.
Man, my guest today is becoming a very, very quick friend. So much so that she recently invited me to go to South Africa with her and some other amazing birth workers in order to sit with some traditional midwives in the townships bordering the massive city of Johannesburg, South Africa. And of course, I was like, gosh, I don't know if I can, yeah, definitely sign me up. It's like an instant hell yes. My wife was like, baby, you gotta do these things. Like these awesome opportunities come up, and I oftentimes turn things down. But I was like, hell yeah. And my compadre, Sarah Rosser, my co-creator on the Born Free Method, she's also going. And we're gonna have an awesome time just using 2 ears, 1 mouth, just listening, really kind of experiencing, feeling into the realities of the ongoing realities of post-apartheid South Africa. So that is awesome. And at the time of this recording, I'm in Oceanside waiting on the birth of a baby. Because that's what we do as birth workers. That's what we do. We sit with birth. So I've been here waiting and waiting and waiting for about 3 weeks now. My wife and girls came, and man, watching our toddler, or not a toddler, she's like a kid now, Penny, nearly 4 years old, interact with the ocean is just one of the greatest things ever. And of course, our little toddler, Evie, is definitely right behind her sister. It really makes us thoughtful about going back to the West Coast, the best coast. Kentucky's great, don't get me wrong. It's just not Southern California. It's hard to disagree with that. My wife got stung with a stingray. Anybody ever been hit with a stingray? Good Lord. I was talking to some of my first surfer friends, and one of them said that the barbs, like depending on how big the stingray is, the barbs are like, they're like, cartilage, and they whip them so hard that they can shatter like your toes. They can shred through tendon. So fortunately, my wife just had like a pop puncture on the top of her foot, and 30 minutes later, she was like, this is getting to be like as bad as childbirth. And I was like, oh my God. So she went to the lifeguard, and the lifeguard said, well, about 30 minutes or so after the stingray, you're probably not going to be able to walk and talk. And meanwhile, it was like she had already been 30 minutes in. And they were like, oh my God, go home. So she hobbled back, got in the car, drove herself back. I stayed with the girls at the beach, and she put her foot in hot water, and it did help. And then like a week after, goes back home and gets bit by a spider, 2 bites in her same foot. And it was all puffy. It looked like a Shrek foot. So we nipped that one in the bud. I'm hoping that like the third thing isn't that she has an anvil from the sky just randomly fall and crush her tootsies. But hoping my wife's speedy recovery. Yeah, California is pretty great. I had to like bring all of my gear out here, all the resuscitation equipment, all the sutures, all the stuff that I hope I don't have to use. I had to get rent a oxygen tank at the local medical supply store. It's just a part of this traveling birth work thing, which is not a financially very lucrative thing for me to do. As I've been working just like always, day in and day out, in order to keep up our finances. But the couple that I'm attending to, they're friends. It's Drew Canoli, who owns a company called Organifi. If you haven't heard about Organifi, go to Organifi.com/beloved. Pick up my recommendations. Pick up some green juice, red juice, gold latte. If you're a female, pick up some of their Cacao Harmony. These are some of the highest quality whole food enrichments to your already healthy lifestyle that you can imagine. And they just came out with their pumpkin spice gold latte, which is like a perennial favorite. It's just so freaking good. It's like autumn and marshmallows had a baby. So delicious. There's a lot of like lemon balm in it, and then clove and all the pumpkin spice flavors, but lemon balm and some turmeric, and there's some coconut milk, powdered coconut milk into it. It's creamy. It's delicious. It is just so good. It's like if you took like a pumpkin pie and melted it and put it into a cup. And that pumpkin pie, of course, was loaded with gluten-free, glyphosate-free, organic ingredients. That's what you get with their gold latte. It's unbelievable. I'm going to probably bring some with me as a little sleep aid, because it definitely helps you get, more restful sleep at night. I'll probably bring that with me to South Africa to help with the time zone differences. We're going to be talking to Sevonna Brown. She's the National Director of Restore Forward, restoreny.org. You can find her work at Restore Forward on Instagram. She nailed it by getting that handle. That's awesome. It's not like Restore Forward 217. It's like just Restore Forward. She's a Black doula, an advocate for maternity care change. She is a sister from another mister. I am so stoked to be with her in South Africa. We're bringing this episode to you in case you want to support her work in some way. Of course, there's plenty of time to sign up. Go to restoreny.org. You'll see all the information. We'll put a link directly to that subpage on their website. We'd love to have you there. If you're a listener, come on to South Africa with me and Sarah Rosser and Sevonna Brown. There's a lot of education in this episode, right? There's a lot of complicated politics and policies and a history in South Africa, which is really it's not the same as in the United States, but racism and this sort of systemic violence perpetrated against those less fortunate is not like a unique thing to sub-Saharan Africa. But there's a lot to be thoughtful about here. I just loved this interview. And remember, this is all like public, forward-facing education. It's all free. So we do have a couple sponsors. Mentioned Organifi, but also go check out BIRTHFIT. BIRTHFIT is providing personalized lifestyle and strength and conditioning programming for pregnant and postpartum women. This is not something you find at LA Fitness or Planet Fitness or whatever. People need, the trainer that you seek out needs to have very, very specific skills, a way of assessing you during the different trimesters, during the postpartum period. Hang on one second. And there's not many people out there who do that, but BIRTHFIT professionals do. I've done their certification. It is stellar. It really opened my eyes up. Even given that I've committed myself to lifestyle and to all this other stuff, I learned so much from their training. These coaches are out of this world. Amazing. So birthfit.com is where you can find them if you want to find a coach. You can also sign up and become a coach yourself if you're already a health coach, or if you're a doula, a childbirth educator, if you're a doctor, midwife. There's definitely something in this program for you. Go to birthfit.com, use code BELOVED. You can save 20% on their postpartum basics program, which is great. I also did that right after the birth of our second. I actually did it myself, and my wife, she also jumped in. And then you can also use that code BELOVED in order to get a free month in the B community. We're going to meet like-minded people. That community is built by women for women just like you. And there's too much to say about what they're offering at such a low monthly rate of $24.99, but you'll get your first month free. You're going to love it. Just go and cash that in. Just cash it in. It's like you're finding $5 in your pocket. Just go spend it on something, or give it to somebody, right? Go give it to somebody who needs a meal. This is just such a great offering. So go and cash that in. Check out BIRTHFIT. Lindsay Cantu and her team. Congrats to Lindsay. You just had a baby, by the way. And then WeNatal, of course, is my new favorite prenatal vitamin. You're going to get all the nutrition without having to take 10 capsules per day. You're going to have all the right vitamin D, folate, vitamin D, folate, the other B vitamins, choline. I mean, there's so many reasons to have a little additional insurance that you're getting adequate nutrition for you, your placenta, your baby, as you go through this tremendous process of building a human and then birthing a human earthside. So what I love about WeNatal is, in addition to it only being 3 capsules a day versus 10 capsules per day, they send you a journal to help dial in the mental and emotional and even spiritual aspects of this whole process. And they're very, very thoughtful about how much packaging they're using. So there's a good reason that me and Dr. Hyman, who's kind of the face of functional medicine, love this product beyond just the nutritional and the sort of mind-body connection that they take. They also are very, very thoughtful about using recycled materials. And when you subscribe, which you can do at wenatal.com/beloved, they'll send you glass jars and then sleeves of capsules to refill those glass jars every month. So you're not going through these big bulky canisters and all this paper, stuffing and whatnot. They're actually able to minimize that. If we don't care for the planet, guys, it doesn't matter what happens to humans. Like, we're going to perish with it. So they're very, very thoughtful about that. And I think that that's a really, really nice attribute that WeNatal brings to this space that a lot of other prenatal companies are not doing, vitamin companies. As a listener of the show, if you go there and you add any prenatal product and to the checkout, and then you add a bottle of their new Omega DHA Plus, which is a super high quality fish oil. I personally wish that there was a little bit more EPA per capsule, because you end up having to take quite a few. I always tell people at least aim for a gram of EPA daily. There's a variety of different omega-3s, 4 in particular. The one that you want in your prenatal is EPA, which is converted to DHA, which has all of its beautiful omega-3 effects around the body. And of course, it's also relevant for the development of your baby's brain and a lot of other tissues. So anyways, you can get a free bottle of that with a purchase of any prenatal products at wenatal.com/beloved. Take advantage of this, guys. Like, let them know you're listening. Go and cash in on this code. Try it out. This has replaced, this is my recommendation for the prenatal vitamins out there. And I hope it will be for a long time. But, everybody's out there competing. There's lots of competition. This just so happens to be my favorite right now. And if we were going to have another baby, which we aren't, this is the company I would go with. So wenatal.com/beloved. Organifi, BIRTHFIT, WeNatal, thank you guys so much for entrusting me with your brand. I only bring on sponsors who are fully in alignment with what I do, and you guys are definitely it. All right, Sevonna Brown, Restore Forward. You've heard from her before. She's been on here on the podcast in the past. You heard her through Ricky Lake's film, The Business of Birth Control. Ricky Lake is actually the one who put us in touch. While I've been down here, I actually visited Ricky in her beautiful Malibu home. Oh my God, what a view. What a view. 15th anniversary of The Business of Being Born. She gave me a t-shirt and I wear it with pride. It's pink. It's beautiful. It feels so good in pink. Makes me look more tan than I actually am. Anyways, I digress. Sevonna's here. Enjoy this conversation, guys. Follow Sevonna at Restore Forward on Instagram. And come with us to South Africa, restoreny.org, if anything here touches you in any way. And of course, I will announce a special little offer at the very, very end of the episode. So tune in for that. Here's my friend Sevonna Brown, everybody. All right, a month from today, I'm going to be in South Africa. And Sarah Rosser, my counterpart at Born Free Method, we're going to be going to South Africa with you, Sevonna. Thanks for inviting us. And sort of to honor that invitation, I invited you back to talk a little bit about this program, which Sarah and I, by the way, are fucking stoked.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how excited we are. So tell me, why South Africa? Like, why are we going to South Africa?
Oh my goodness. I'm so excited, first of all, Nathan. And I'm glad to be back here in this seat with you, looking at you and honoring all the work that you do. And thank you for the mutuality.
Snapping over here.
Yeah. A couple years ago, we were in conversation with Machilo Motsei, who is known as a just badass anti-rape activist, anti-violence activist, really known for her work in preventing violence against women in South Africa. And we were having a conversation with her about the intersection anti-violence work and holistic medicine, and how necessary that is, especially for US based practitioners, to understand that, because the medical system in the United States is, based on, steeped in violence against women, unfortunately, historically, in addition to medical racism, medical misogyny. And so, she was like, well, do you know? Because we were talking about the maternal mortality and morbidity crisis in the US. And she was like, do you know that there are midwives here in the mountains of South Africa who've never lost a mother? Like, not one. And she like looked at me with conviction to say that, and I think
I mean, that's
myself,
pretty remarkable.
yeah, I mean, in that moment, myself and Farah Tanis, the CEO of Restore Forward, looked back and forth at each other, and we were like, how is that possible? And she started sharing with us, she was like, well, because they use ancestral practices, because they use indigenous wisdom, because they're not using the interventions and the unnecessary,
Yeah.
procedures and medicines that you all misuse and abuse so often.
The problems that we create and then we come in as heroes to solve, right?
Simply, simply
Yeah.
and brilliantly put it,
Yeah.
Nathan.
Yeah.
So we
Um,
said to ourselves, like, we gotta go. We need to go see what this means. Like, what we need to make sense of this
mm,
for ourselves and for our communities, because we know inherently that that's true. However, we have no idea where to start, and what we need to do is humble ourselves and
yeah.
be in a commitment to learning.
I think when people hear the word violence, like let's talk about obstetric violence just for a second. I think what people think is that a sharp thing is hurting you, or somebody's hitting you, or somebody's pinning you down, and that's all obstetric violence. But as I've been thinking about this for years, and by the way, I'll share very quickly. There was a black woman who had given birth like 6 times at the hospital where I trained for residency, and she was back, and everybody was so familiar with her because they had all like she had back-to-back babies just over and over, some miscarriages, some losses, but she was always coming back, and they
Mm,
knew her, like they knew her as soon as she walked in the door, like there's so and so. And there was one time when she came in pregnant again, was on the monitors and decided she just wanted to leave, like went to Taco Bell down the street. She just walked out, and they were like, Dr. Riley, you have to stop her. And I'm like, I was just admiring her. I was like, she's just being an adult. Like she's just walking away. But most people feel compelled due to the potential fear of something, some punitive measure for them to go against the white person in the white coat. And
mhm.
this is obviously deeply threaded within the fabric of our society. So I think violence and racism go hand in hand.
Yes.
And I don't think that they would have done that, expected me to intervene if it was a white woman. I just don't think it was the case. So I just sat in admiration of this. Like, what a strong human, just saying, no, no, thank you, and walking away. It kind of set the stage for my whole platform on like personal accountability in childbirth. Like you
Mhm.
ultimately have the say, and I have to honor that. I'm here to serve you, not the other way around. So,
Yeah. Oh my
so
God, what a beautiful, amazing story.
yeah.
Also.
I was like, I wish I like could hang out with her and have coffee with her because she is like a real that's a badass. Like that is somebody who really knows what they stand for. And I just really admire that. And so anyways, it seems tangential, but I think that when we're talking about the history of gynecology and obstetrics, particularly in the United States, this term traditional midwifery comes up, and it's kind of a charged term now because I don't think too many
Yeah.
people really appreciate what does traditional midwifery really mean. And I want to also add that, and I'd love to get into this a little bit with you, is some of the sordid history and why I think there is such an oppressive level of this underlying racism within the care of Black women in particular in the hospital systems, which largely are run by people that look like me. We have to also consider like the godfather of gynecology, J. Marion Sims, experimenting on women without anesthesia to develop really probably important procedures, but using women who were very disenfranchised and really had no way around it. I just made T-shirts. I'm going to send you one, by the way, that says J. Marion Sims was a bitch, and it has his face on it.
I need that shirt.
We'll all have one for our South Africa trip. But anyways, we've got this rich history. When people are talking about the role of racism in our socioeconomic health disparities, I think all of these terms are relevant. So so when a person talks about a traditional midwife, what I'm sort of presuming is when we go to South Africa with Restore Forward, and guys, by the way, if you want to check it out, Restore, what is it? Restore NY. Say the website again.
So it's www.restoreny.org. NY like
RestoreNY.org. Sorry. Okay. Awesome. So go and check that out, guys. I think that you will find that there's quite a bit, if you want to support these types of campaigns. But tell me what a traditional midwife is. I'm hoping that I'm going to be sitting with some and honoring traditional midwifery when we're on our trip together.
Yeah, 100% you will be. And like, this is the exciting part about this journey to South Africa is that the midwives, what I will also say about these amazing midwives that you'll be experiencing in South Africa is, yes, they identify as traditional midwives. And they also identify as Indigenous midwives. And they also identify as traditional healers.
Mm.
So for many of them, midwifery is not a profession. It's not even really a call. It's a spiritual obligation that comes with endowed wisdom.
Oh,
so
love that.
It's like I am drenched with the dreams of my aunt's aunt, who was a midwife, who understood anatomy, who understood medicine, who understood healing, who understood care work, who understood, the scriptures of medicine, really, and left me those messages and intercedes in my spiritual life, whether it be dreaming or otherwise, plant relations or otherwise, how to discern that same medicine, how to read that same medicine, read the sky, read the ground, read the water, read the body, read the belly, read the uterus, all of these different things. So for them, traditional means tradition, ancestry, indigeneity, medicine passed on. And for so many of the midwives who you'll meet and be able to speak to, they don't kind of largely fall into this narrow chasm of what midwifery means to us as
very
US,
narrow. Yeah.
US
It's a very specific thing here. Yeah.
Yeah. US comers, right? And not to dismiss the vast expansiveness of African-American traditional midwifery, which, for them, they would say we're the medicine woman in the community, for everyone. You don't have to have a fetus in your belly to need midwifery care. So I'm not saying it to misdiagnose our understanding of what midwifery in the US is, but to just provide a more expansive definition that these midwives shared with me, which was that, they come from lineages of traditional healers. And they can't help who those people were and how they operated and what kinds of medicine they brought. They land in that lineage. They land in that genealogy. And because the sacredness of birth and birth keeping is a part of traditional healing and traditional healing medicine, midwifery is revered. So that, when we sit at the feet of these midwives, we're sitting with them from that perspective, from that vantage point, from that larger tree of traditional healers that they call themselves a member of, that they call themselves a part of, that they call themselves in the constellation of.
Yeah.
So I'm really grateful that they honor our limitations when we're there. They respect our ignorance. They laugh and poke fun at us even because of how limited our understandings are. And yet they are extremely generous with their time, with their ritual, with their examples, with their course correcting, so the way that the space takes shape is really kind of in the form of encounters with the midwives. So I wouldn't call them interviews, but they're kind of these settings in which we kind of sit and we
Yeah.
engage and like we grapple and we ask questions and we wrestle with, and we also undo our own patriarchy, our own misogyny, our own injustices, our own traumas within our own bodies and where they live, right? And that is for anyone of any context, of any race, background, or gender who is sitting in front of these midwives, because their paradigm
Yeah.
around health
Yeah.
giving, caregiving, and healing is so distinct from our own.
Mm.
So that's what traditional midwifery looks like from this seat of the South African midwives that we'll be with.
Yeah. You know, with so much tension in maternity care within the United States, I mean, there's horizontal violence left and right. Midwives tearing down midwives, midwives on doctors, doctors on midwives, doulas, childbirth educators. Everybody's just like, as if there's some sort of limited pie that you need your like little slice and you're going to defend it. And I think a lot of like the licensed or the certified professional midwives, they feel like there's um, no room for traditional midwives, and traditional midwives, rightfully so, are like, who the hell are you? Like I'm the fourth generation of somebody doing this. Just because I don't have a diploma doesn't mean I can't do this work. You know, I mean, there's all this tension. So um, one thing I found very interesting when I started promoting this journey that we're going to be going on together, and a variety of other birth workers, which, you know, towards the end, I'd love you to kind of describe um, the sort of composition of attendees that are going to be joining us, because I'm very excited to meet them as much as I am spending time with some of these midwives in Johannesburg. But some of the comments were interesting. You know, I think a lot of people even born and raised in, we'll just say South Africa, because I don't want to speak for the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, but I do know that there's a very privatized and public way of approaching healthcare in many of these sort of post-colonial African nations. But South Africa, of course, is very special for reasons that I'm sure we'll get into, given Grand Apartheid and Nelson Mandela's work and the freedom movements there. But you know, before we even get into that, I just wanted to kind of pick your brain a little bit. I don't know if you saw some of the comments that were coming in on my Instagram posts, but a lot of people were sort of like, you know, women giving birth in South Africa, some of them aren't even aware of midwifery, you know, based obstetrics or midwifery care for the birth of their babies. So much so there were so many comments like that it almost seemed like there's two separate worlds in South Africa, and one world doesn't know about the other, and the other world probably knows about, you know, their counterpart. Maybe the midwives know about the medical system, but I wonder, given that, I don't know if you can, if you have enough insights yet on this. I'm sure we'll learn quite a bit when we go there together. But is this one of those kind of underground, kind of subverted practices nowadays? Is that the only way that it can survive? Is that why so many women perhaps aren't considering midwifery care? Is it the same reasons that many people in the U.S. are kind of stunned, you know, by this illusion of safety offered by the hospital, and so they don't even pursue an understanding of midwifery? Do you have any sort of insights
Yeah,
there?
I would love to share. I mean, there's a spectrum of midwifery that we'll look at when we get to South Africa, because of the commentary that folks have named in the
Hmm.
comments on the promotion that you've shared about South Africa. It's not that the whole country is mobilizing around traditional midwifery in South
Sure.
Africa, right? What my experience is that there is, in the same way that you name the tensions, the cascade, and might I say the stratification of birth care and maternal health care that we have in the US, you know, which includes doctors, midwives, traditional midwives, and hospital-based midwives, birth workers, doulas, birth keepers, right? In the same way that we have that like cascading stratification,
Yeah.
we're seeing a similar schematic and ecosystem in South Africa.
Hmm.
Now, the the specifically the kind of isolation or the segregation of that stratification is not only due to the political landscape in South Africa, but it's also due to issues of class
Hmm.
and also issues of difference around spirituality and lineage. So
Hmm.
there are many factors that would inform why traditional midwifery and indigenous midwifery might be held, preserved, honored, protected in a particular aspect of South African society and not in another, right?
Hmm.
When you land in South Africa and you plant your feet on the ground, the most visceral experience that you have is actually the ramifications of colonization. You can feel and see it right away. There's a McDonald's, there's a KFC, there's a mall, it's very metro. You feel like you're not far from Los Angeles or Syracuse, New York
This is in Johannesburg, like
at that time,
right out the gate. Oh,
right
interesting.
out of the gate. However, when we journey into the villages, into the townships where the predominant aspect of life is survival, these most indigenous wisdoms and medicines are kept and held sacredly.
Mm.
And so, when you ask the question, is it an underground practice? There's a couple of midwives that we'll talk to who have actually taken like some more main stage medical academia spaces to advocate for traditional midwifery to be centered, as we've seen in the US. And then
Yeah.
there are others who their native language is such a subculture of South Africa that they don't even have access or knowledge to those kinds of spaces. They just know that their medicine would be demonized, villainized, and criminalized, and maybe even in some instances have them killed. And so they wouldn't
Yeah.
dare step into a university setting, a political setting, or a hospital or clinical medical setting to say, oh, here's my medicine, here's what we should be doing, here's what we should have, here's what we should be honoring, here's how we've kept all of the women in my village alive for the last 600 years. They know better than that, or they don't even have the access to that kind of space. So there is that form of stratification that exists, that form of segregation that exists amongst medicine keeping. And there are state of the art hospitals in South Africa that operate just like Cedar Sinai.
It's wild,
So,
isn't it?
right. So it's not that, indigenous midwifery and traditional midwifery is dominating the landscape. That's not true. And I've yet to find a place where that is true. I would love to go to that kind of Disney for you and
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
But that is not something I have found yet. And in many ways, it is a privilege that many of these midwives are allowing us the opportunity to sit at their feet, to learn and gain from them, because because in very real material ways, it's a risk for them. It's
Yeah.
a risk. It's not a dominant narrative for the folks who are saying in the comments for any promotions around this South Africa journey. It's not a dominant narrative that like, what do the women in South Africa know about midwifery? For many of them, they're born into it. For many of the young schoolgirls, they come home and they know how to fetch the water and they know what herbs are needed and they know how to do the prayers and the rituals and they know how to count the moons and they know how to understand the earth as medicine and they know how to recover their mother or themselves from childbirth. So it's not entirely true that the South African woman knows nothing about traditional midwifery, but it's also not entirely true that traditional midwifery is the dominant modality
Yeah.
for childbirth, medicine, and the reproductive spectrum in South Africa either. So the tension
Hmm.
lies there as well.
Yeah. Something that comes to mind, I just finished Leah Penniman's book, Black Earth Wisdom. What an
Yes.
awesome book. What an awesome
Yes.
like way to reframe our conservation efforts here in the United States, given that the roots of really the true conservationists actually is sort of an inherent part of various African, I'm using African, not like the dumb white guy that's treating Africa like a country,
No,
but like the
I will hold
diaspora
that.
of people around the continent of Africa. Like it's almost like as racism is threaded into the fabric of like contemporary US society, like ecosystem conservation is actually a part of a variety of traditions from across the African continent. And one really compelling story that came to mind as you were talking about sort of like the herbal wisdom and whatnot was actually Harriet Tubman, who, I don't think needs much introduction. At least I hope not. We're just going to presume people know who Harriet Tubman was. But she was actually like so deeply connected to the stars and the moon and the herbs that she could use to care for people along the way as she was helping them escape the chains of slavery. And that
Yes.
wasn't something like she didn't go to herbalism school. That was just a part of her fabric and something her mother and her
Yes.
grandmother and her great grandmother probably all kind of just passed down. So when I
Yes.
hear midwife, from what you're saying, you're right. It's actually more than birth. It's actually like these are people who care for other people
Yes.
and
And
they
care for the
understand. Yeah, and it requires a whole ecosystem for us to stay like for us to like keep the ship afloat. And I'll harken back to like Nelson Mandela and this concept of Ubuntu, which was one of the hallmarks of really his freedom movement, was that it's actually even harkens back to Daniel Quinn's Ishmael, like I am because you are, and you are because I am. I mean, there's this very, very basic notion where people care for one another. And we even see that reflected in how Black families care for one another in the United States before they invest maybe even in their own, material needs. They're caring for people. I think you even had told this to me once before, where it's like our idea of adopting is not the same in the United States as most white people. Like you might have a kin that you're actually caring for, and that's just a part of the deal because your sister or brother passed away. That's just how we care for one another, and that actually is reflected, I think, in the most prescient, let's say, eco conservation efforts as well. So this is more of a truly holistic approach. Going back
Yeah.
to that word. Hey guys, it's Nathan. Sorry for this brief interruption, but I got to tell you about a new offering that I'm going to be making available this fall. You've heard about the Born Free Method. That's our comprehensive pregnancy and postpartum program. Includes 12 months of weekly calls, 100 plus video modules, tons of citations around pregnancy and postpartum. Well, Born Free is an umbrella under which there's going to be a lot of other courses. And the second course in this anthology is called Clear and Free, Your Solution to Persistent HPV. It's a collaborative effort between me and Mimi Lindquist of the Medicine podcast. She is a relative expert in, I say relative because I don't consider anybody a full expert in anything, but Mimi has gone deep into human papillomavirus and some of the ways that we can use lifestyle to augment the immune system in hopes that your routine screening for HPV or your routine pap smears are going to come up negative and clear, so you can go another 3 to 5 years and not even think about it until your next appointment, whereby hopefully you'll screen negative again. So the typical path that many women experience of all ages in their OBGYN clinic is, hey, you're due for a pap smear and we're going to test for HPV as well. If one of those comes back abnormal, your OBGYN is going to say, oh, darn it, it's abnormal. Why don't you come back for a repeat screening in 6 months or 12 months? And this process continues, right, until you end up with either a progression of abnormal cells in the cervix caught on pap smear or a persistence of human papillomavirus, meaning your body has not been able to integrate the message of this virus, right? Remember, viruses are not living things. So in the meantime, your OBGYN or your midwife or nurse practitioner hasn't given you any tools in order to help support your immune system through diet, through movement, through sleep, through stress management, through hydration, through all of those modifiable lifestyle factors, so that you can be sure that if you had an HPV positive screen initially, that the next time it's going to be negative. Now, the other part of that conversation, of course, is, hey, I got the HPV vaccine. Aren't I safe now? Well, the problem with Gardasil 9, which is the primary vaccine that is offered to young men and women as early as age 9, has not been demonstrated to be either effective at preventing cervical cancer nor safe because of the aluminum adjuvants and everything else. So there's a lot of controversy around HPV and cervical cancer, and even cervical cancer screening methods, along with this vaccine. What do I do? Should I get it? Should I not get it? Should my little girls get this vaccine? And so, given the sort of swirling pool of information and misinformation out there, I went deep as well. And Mimi and I teamed up in order to clarify for everybody out there the realities around what HPV and cervical cancer screening looks like, what can be done while you're waiting for your follow-ups in order to support your immune system to integrate the message of that virus and avoid any abnormal cells developing, and hopefully avoid painful biopsies, or even worse, LEEP procedures, cold knife comb procedures, and of course, worst case scenarios, cervical cancer. There's so much that's in your power. Your doctors, your practitioners probably aren't maybe educated or incentivized to share all of that information, but we're going to do that through this course, as well as all of the realities around vaccines, especially Gardasil 9. We look at data from the United States and elsewhere in the world. We speak to attorneys who are litigating on this topic around Gardasil 9. What you can expect from the course is around 90 lessons, self-guided. And we're going to also offer monthly calls for 6 months after you enroll with me and Mimi, where we're going to be able to answer all of your questions and provide you with that support that perhaps you aren't getting from the healthcare professionals that you've entrusted your cervical cancer screening and your well woman care. So we get into HPV, we get into cervical cancer screening, we get into the immune system, vaccines, viruses. It's everything you've wanted to know about any of those topics. Go to the link in the show notes and you'll find your way to book an enrollment call, and we'll get you enrolled right there. We're going to be enrolling in October. I hope to see you there.
Yeah. And I'm so excited to be like in the dirt, in the red earth with you, like in South Africa, because that's what it is, Nathan, the whole time. And I think if there's anything we can bring back to people a month from now, when we return, I hope we're sitting together having this conversation in retrospect, then it is that whole of systems, like approach. And when we say systems, we mean the earth. We mean spirit, we mean the body, we mean the mind, we mean like all of these systems that are solar, that are, all of those systems are the ones that we need to care for most. And I'm so agreeable to what you're sharing, because we've gotten, this isolated notion of midwifery is also like very much a patriarchal, narcissistic concept that is also like harming the tradition. Like that is not exactly it. Like it doesn't actually encompass, care for, comprehend, or protect and preserve all of the facets of traditional midwifery that should be cared for and protected and preserved. And I think even sometimes in holistic spaces, we start to like parse apart, like we start to sever. It's like, okay, let's keep the astrologists over here and the body workers over here and the midwives over here and the this and the that. And it's like, well, there's an integral anatomy to that like should be honored, like, which is a very African perspective. These pieces get interwoven. And if you ask someone to identify themselves, they may look at you befuddled. Like, I actually don't meet your categories or your requirements of isolation. Like I arrive in the world.
This like categorization. Totally.
And hyper professionalization, which we've all been pushing back on.
I mean, gosh, you brought the word patriarchy up. I wasn't going to do it, but patriarchy, like the essence of patriarchy, I don't think people appreciate that. I think people think feminism. These types of terms come up, but what patriarchy to me really means is that when we start to objectify, then we can classify. And once we can classify, we can stratify. And that whole notion, right, that you have value only if these conditions are met, that to me is really the essence of patriarchy when you take a 15,000-foot view. And that has degraded our societies. It's led us to war. It has degraded a woman's role in society, especially a Black woman's role in society. And I think in South Africa, I mean, talk about a complicated political space for the past 100 years. Mm-hmm. How do you think the politics of South Africa in a very patriarchal way I mean, gosh, even consider most of the major countries in Africa. And by the way, I just said Africa, I meant South Africa. I've been to Cape Town. while I was there, I was doing an analysis of the healthcare systems, believe it or not, when I was on a
Wow.
studying
All
abroad.
right.
And I spent some time in Cape Town, went to Robben Island, and stood in the spot where Nelson Mandela was breaking rocks, being spoken to by Dennis Brutus, who was one of our professors on the trip, who was like 80 at the time. He also happened to be University of Pittsburgh sociology or political history professor. He was speaking to us while I was standing on the spot, which was, by the way, next to the spot that Dennis Brutus used to sit as a
Wow.
white. He was a white Afrikaner who was sitting next to Nelson Mandela, breaking the rocks with him. I had this really spiritual kind of experience there,
Mm,
and so what was really special about that is, again, you go back into the metropolitan center of Cape Town. Cape Town is one of the most beautiful cities that you will ever step foot in. I mean, it is, Table Mountain is right behind it. It's gorgeous. But as soon as you go around the mountain and you end up in the townships, you see a very, very different picture here. And
immediately.
this is patriarchy at its finest, or its worst, depending on how you want to frame it. Johannesburg, I suspect, with Soweto being, the birthplace of Nelson Mandela, I suspect that there is a very, very different feeling around words like patriarchy and maybe even progress and whatnot in the townships than you would find in the metropolitan areas. How do you think politics is going to play into what we appreciate about the role of these, I'm using air quotes on my end, midwives in townships that historically are violent, unsafe, not very hospitable places for people of color?
Yeah. I mean, back to the conversation I was having a few minutes ago about survival. This is something we will confront while we're
Yeah.
there, right? And for those who don't know, South Africa has a like kind of tripartite racial stratification. So black, white, and colored people are distinctly named different, segregated, and housed with one another, married to one another, access different kinds of healthcare and well-being and wellness from one another. And midwives are also subjected to this, kind of politic of race. That is their reality. That is also a ramification of apartheid.
Mm.
And so, I'm curious about what your experience in Cape Town was in terms of assessing the healthcare system there. But what I'm most interested in is the distinction that you made between the metropolitan areas and the townships. Like these are
Yeah.
dramatic, drastic differences that
It's beyond, whoever listening, if you don't know, it is beyond your wildest imagination how quickly it changes. It's like you cross the street and bam, you are in a community of 100,000 people living in tin shacks,
yeah, that's right.
and you were just at a restaurant that has, steaks for $60. Like,
That's right.
unbelievable.
Yeah. So this unbelievable difference is also the difference in healthcare that women are also facing. So when I say there's a state of the art hospital, and then there's a township where there's a midwife who goes around. Now, what I should also name, and I failed to mention this, and I'm assuming it, and maybe you all are also assuming it. Many of these midwives are elders. They're in their
Yeah,
80s, in their
yeah.
90s. They're centenarians. They're approaching 100 years old. Many of these midwives are tasked with keeping communities alive, not just pregnant women, pregnant birthing people, but keeping whole communities alive. And they are elders. And they are also extremely tired and need the opportunity to pass their medicine down to someone who's endowed with the medicine. And so there's also a breakage in terms of the passing on of the wisdom and the medicine. We're actually seeing like some concern about whether or not the tradition will last,
Mm.
will like live. So Machilo Mose will talk about that, but that political landscape that you described, Nathan, in South Africa, wherein on one side of the street there are mansions and on the other side of the street there are townships, those are so stark that they like cast immediate tears in your eyes. They're extremely stark experiences. That I'm thinking of what creative ways to ready and prepare a group for. But in terms of how the midwives navigate that, for many of them, there's such a sense of pride and privilege for them because they have the medicine. So there's not a lot of like pity or admiration about like what's on the other side of the street for them. Their wisdom really oversaturates and overcomes that. Should their material conditions be different? 100%. They should be. But there is not a mechanism in terms of the ministries of health in South Africa, in terms of governances, in terms of political landscape. There's not a mechanism to make sure that they're funded and protected and that their healing is understood and translated
Yeah.
to the masses. There's not a mechanism for that. And nor is there a desire or willingness. So when we go and we like seed our little payment for the time that we're there, we're sustaining them just a little bit at a time. We're barely helping them to hold on to this culture and preserve it. But we're doing our own kind of systematic change making by supporting their art, by supporting their craft, by supporting their community and the communities that they grow and preserve. And the lineages of traditional healing and medicine that they also preserve.
Yeah.
So that stark contrast is something we can't avoid while we're there. It's 100% a part of the culture and the evidence of South Africa's struggle.
Yeah, it's funny. It's sort of I used to go to Malawi. I don't know if I ever told you this, but I used to do a lot of work in Malawi, East Africa, which is one of the slivers, probably one of the 5 most impoverished nations in the world. I don't want to say it's number 1 because, it's hard to compare that. But when you look at their statistics, economically, health, whatever, I mean, they are down near the bottom. And I was compelled to go there in college and ultimately ended up starting an international nonprofit to raise money for the community-based organizations doing the work in these catchment areas outside of the major cities. And it's not a metropolitan city like, Lilongwe is the capital there. It's not a metropolitan city like Johannesburg. It's a pretty darn poor city. And then there's actually even more poor people. Like poor people are even more poor outside of that in the rural areas, which is, pretty typical of most nations. But when I would tell people that I was going, the first thing out of their mouth would be like, "Oh, they're so poor," like this almost pity. And I never had the experience that there was any pity desired or like they were, it's like kind of cliche, but it's like they were so happy. They were like, they made me reflect on how much money I spend on things that don't bring me happiness. So, cliches aside, it is interesting how we don't like to look at this stuff. Like we don't want to recognize that Soweto for the past, since Grand Apartheid has remained one of the most impoverished, packed in, dare I call slum. I don't think they would call it a slum, but I think a lot of people economically speaking would be like, how on earth is this giant collection of people not cared for when we have, massive malls and things just miles away on the down the road in the major city. So it's really curious to me that it's almost like we have to look at this. We have to actually be there and feel through the pain as a means of self-reflecting on the way that we show up in the world. In other words, you can't read about South Africa and appreciate it. You have to go into these townships and just be there.
100%.
That's why I'm going.
Yeah, thank you for that. Oh my God, I feel like that's so beautifully said and well said about just, well, one, about how African diasporic communities experience themselves, which is like,
yeah, I can't
all this
imagine.
pity that you all create and like, without naming names, because there's a lot of philanthropic efforts that, actually thrive on this narrative that like poor people are the most unhappy people in the world. And like, if only we would go make that change that.
Yeah.
When in fact, like when we get there, we actually we realize there's an untapped joy that they remind us of. And again, I say that to say that, of course, should their material conditions change? Of course. But there's also a humility and a power and privilege scale and paradigm that we're not investigating. And I think I shared this in the last podcast, but I'll share it again. And we can like talk through this. But the last time I went to South Africa, myself and another midwife put together all of these like birth kits for the indigenous midwives, right? We had like gloves and umbilical cord scissors and like fundus tape and all this amazing stuff. And like we made it so cute and we were so excited and proud, and we like brought it to them, and they literally were like ripping it apart, looking at it and like laughing. And they were just like, all this
What is this silly stuff?
antiseptic is in the ground. I measure with my hands.
Wow.
Right? Like I listen with my eyes. Like they were just so explicit about how baffling it was that we thought we had something to bring. And I don't say that as a way of like shaming us, as like trying to make a contribution and trying to be a gift, but to really humble us and to think about and be more mindful about like what it is that we actually need to gain. Like what is the gift we're there to receive, and how we honor that and how we step into that and sit in that seat is important. And the Manchilo, the midwife, laughed and she was like, next time bring them something beautiful, like some earrings or something to put on. Like they'd be much more happy with like something cute to wear. But she did name, and I will say this, right, noted. She did say, and I will say this, knowing that Nathan and I are leaving in a month, God help us, I don't want to inundate us, that there is a midwife who would appreciate those birth kits, right? And I have a sample of one, and I'll share it with you, Nathan, like via text or something. I'll send you a picture of it. But she was like, now that midwife could use it, right? But, just again, like thinking through, like being in the spirit of receiving, especially when learning from our peers, learning from traditional midwifery, like allowing traditional midwifery to be the expertise is so crucial and so critical and so necessary. And, I have self-forgiveness and self-reflection. I'm like, why the hell do we bring those crazy birth kits with us? But, at the same time, it was such a major learning lesson for me. And that's not true for all midwives in South Africa. Some of them would be like delighted to receive that kind of birth kit, but others, there might be something else that would be more responsive to that. So there's just so much to gain. And there's indigenous midwives all over the world, Nathan. This is like our first city. We're just going to one area, right? So
I wonder if we could organize one of these, and I'll join again, in Mexico, to learn more with the parteras in Mexico.
Thinking about this for such a while. Yes.
I've got the hookup because my mother-in-law is like deeply connected to her hometown of Cuernavaca. But anyways, you're right. I mean, this is not just a uniquely, Cape, the Horn of Africa issue. I mean, this is kind of a global issue, including in our own country. So this is not to say that they need us over there. That is not what this trip is about. I learned that hard lesson in Malawi, where it was like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, I could have given you the money it cost me to fly here, and it would have done more good than me coming over here and like whipping around, vernacular that has no purpose in community-based care of people living with HIV/AIDS. Having said that, that was why I stopped doing it. That's why the program fell apart, and it was for good reason. But I think a lot of us, I remember there was Nicholas Kristof wrote an essay back in the day around the time of the division of Sudan, and he had written about this study they did where they said, the title of it was "Save the Darfur Puppy," and what they had offered college students was an opportunity to donate to save a dog that was sick and needed like an eye surgery, or you could you could donate to this charity that is going to provide food or care in some way for orphans in South Sudan. And more people donated to the dog.
This is it. I've heard this kind of
before. So the only reason that this is actually relevant to this conversation is not to say that people don't care about orphans in South Sudan, but that problem seems so tremendously large that how is my $5 going to make a difference? But if I gave $5 to this dog, then that's 10% of whatever. Like that's a giant chunk towards getting him that $1,000 surgery, that dog. And it just clues you into this sort of psychology of this. When problems seem so,
Mm,
um, you know, they're big beyond our wildest imagination, we tend to withdraw from that. And I think that's what it means to be in these townships, to say, how am I complaining about X, Y, or Z in my daily life whenever there's 100,000 people here dancing every night, sharing food, and still don't even have enough to buy their kids toys, or like,
right.
um, they can't count on necessarily being able to, to make their bus fare to get to that job that they were lucky enough to land. I mean, it's just it seems so confronting for people that are so far removed. So I think getting ourselves back into this space, sitting with the women that are doing this work, and I'm sure that there are some men that are circulating as well, but really kind of feeling into that and just being open-minded about it. And and the way I know that there's an open-mindedness requirement here is that when you go back, like after I would go back from Malawi, I would feel bad for spending $1, let alone $50 on dinner. It was just like, oh my God, what are we doing here? So
Mm,
there's a little piece of humility. There's also some genuine interest for me in learning from women who've sat with so many births and who have a very, very different, truly holistic approach to what caring for other people looks like. Are
yes.
there any other aspects, like what are a couple of things that you are hoping to gain from sitting with some of these women? You've kind of already touched on it, but maybe you can, like,
Yeah.
ring off
I
anything else
mean,
that comes
just
to mind.
to build on what we've already discussed, there's also going to be an opportunity to go to some Black women-owned farms. We're actually going
Oh,
to be
yeah.
engaging with environment and environmental justice as a form of healing the whole time. There's a special trip to what's called the Siani Center, which is a traditional healer that Nelson Mandela actually works with. But there you will see South African traditional healers who are being initiated, and they prepare this beautiful ancestral meal for us. And that is such a humbling, beautiful, delicious meal that I'm really
Can't
excited.
wait.
Yeah, seriously, right? There's an opportunity where we get to go to this profound, beautiful vegan Pan Africanist chef, and it's called the dinner party, and we all sit around one table, even if there's other guests there, and we have a special meal that is designed from the African diaspora, and it's actually a heavily vegan meal, was so holistic and beautiful that we like can't get enough of it. So there's just so many amazing aspects and dynamics, but my hope is like, what do we bring back? Like, how do we intervene? How is just going on this trip an intervention for so many of us and for so many of our siblings in this work and in this movement who, you know, listen to this amazing platform, who gather with us or who we convene, through our conferences and through the other interventions that we do in the world. Like,
Yeah.
how are we bringing it back? That to
Mm,
me, and obviously in the safest, most reasonable and practical way possible, how are we bringing the wisdom and the knowledge back to our communities? And so to me, that's the ripple effect that I'm hoping for. That's the domino effect that I'm praying for and meditating on as we are a month out from this just remarkable journey. So, and I do hope that it results in other global convenings where we're looking to the traditional healers and midwives of the global south to share with us how survival and thriving and healing is possible, towards a form of revolution, to be honest. So, I have my personal reasons for going and wanting to gain and understand and be a blessing to the world, of course. And then, I hope that you all who are with us, and I can't wait to meet Sarah, who I haven't met. I hope that you all who are with us like divine something incredible
yeah.
to share back
Yeah.
with the world. So I feel like I'll see you back in this very seat just to debrief and cry and weep and express gratitude for the journey that we're about to go on just a month from now. So I look
Yeah,
forward.
amazing. What would, as kind of wrap it up, and then I certainly wanna give people the opportunity to, find find Restore Forward in order to
Mhm.
lend their support, or maybe it's not too late to join. I just want people to
Right.
know you're still able to come. For me, it would be hard to say, like, a month from today, I'm going to South Africa, but I fortunately jumped on in time to clear out the schedule and make sure I'm okay there. But what would a revolution in maternity care in the United States look like for you?
Oh my goodness.
Finish with an easy one there for you.
I think about this all the time, Nathan. Like, what does a revolution in the United States look like for maternal health? And that, traditional midwives are obviously at the forefront, but also not just at the forefront, but they're centered also. Because I think all the time we're like, let Black midwives lead, let Black midwives lead. Sure thing. But like, are we in a commitment to care for them and hold them and make them well and repair them and cover them when there are storms and when all of these like kind of matrices of oppression like come for them? Like,
Yeah.
are we encircling traditional midwifery in the way that we should be? Are we holding it as a politic and as a doctrine, as a religion, like we
Yeah.
really should be, because it is life saving. So to me, it's not just Black traditional midwives at the front, but also them at the center, which means that us as a community has to be divinely, unapologetically, unendingly encircling them and their well-being.
Whew.
So until we can commit to that, I don't see a revolution coming, but I am praying and meditating on one.
Yeah. And hopefully it's televised.
Come on now. Yes.
Sevonna, you are a joy. I am so stoked to meet you finally in person and
Yes.
to be eating some traditional South African gourmet with you
Yes.
and dancing and singing and holding space and just kind of feeling through this.
Mm.
And I just know Sarah is so excited. We're both just really, really honored to be able to be invited on the trip. Maybe you can tell us real quickly what's the composition of the group as a
Yeah.
means of trying to convey to people who is this for and maybe who is this not for?
Yeah. So the group is an amazing group. I'm like, woo, it's a legacy
Of
league
course it is.
coming on this trip to South Africa with us. So, this is for anyone who considers themselves touching the realm of maternal health practitioners. So we have everyone from, neonatal care support, we have midwives, we have doulas, we have reproductive justice advocates. So we have non-physicians coming as well. We have medical providers coming. We have birth center owners coming. We have an amazing contingent of Black traditional healers and midwives who are coming with us. Right now, we're trying to cap the trip around 25, and we are at 16. So there's still seats available, y'all. So that's the amazing thing. So you can come if you have a commitment and a dedication to Black maternal health. We really hope to see you in South Africa and Johannesburg. We are really excited and looking forward to also some students who are coming. There's like some
Yeah.
student doulas, some student midwives, some student MDs who are coming with us. So it's really like, I would say like a mixed group, but to me, I'm just like, we're all in good company because we're all in the family and the legacy of midwifery care and
Yeah.
and championing midwifery care.
Yeah.
So that's what brings us at home with one another. So I'm really, really stoked and excited to have such an amazing makeup of folks who are coming, and just lovely people also whom are dear to me. So really looking forward to it. So if you're a practitioner, if you're an academician, even if you're in research, you should come. There's a special home also for anti-violence advocates to come. If you do work around violence against women, trauma-informed care, you should come. Pediatricians. There's going to be a conversation for you in this time. Oh, blessings.
Thank you. So the trip is from November 1st through November 8th. 2023 is the year I think that we're in.
That's the year we went.
There will be more trips, but with all the stuff around travel restrictions and everything that may happen with another COVID thing, I feel very lucky that we can go and do this trip now. I mean, you just never know what the future holds. So if you guys are thinking about joining us, the cost of the trip, do you mind if I say that? And then I'm going to
please share the details.
So $5,500 gets you everything but the flights. And there's this little bit of free time, which I think is really great, where I can maybe just go off and like
Yeah.
kind of be by myself with my feelings, because I know there's going to be a lot of feelings. And well, that was one other thing I was going to say. Oh, so we've Born Free Method has made a couple donations, but I'm
Thank
gonna
you so
ante that up
much.
a little bit. If
Yes.
anybody listening joins as a result of hearing this episode, we'll kick in another $250 for your, to offset a little bit of the cost. We can't do more. I wish we could do more, but if it's a matter of me getting more people there that I think really need to have this to be in this type of space, I'm there to support that. So that offer stands. Are you closing applications, Sevonna, at any point, or is
Yeah,
it
we reached 25 participants. We're going to close the application. I wish I had a date for you. Maybe we can caption that, but I don't have a date right now. But I do know that we have at least like 6 or 7 spots still
okay?
available, if not more,
Okay.
for folks to join. And thank you so much for the donations, for making it accessible, for making it possible for people to come who otherwise wouldn't have been able to have a yes. We're so grateful and excited for that. And if folks are like, we can't come, but we want to be in a learning session afterward, and we still want to give and we want to support, I would welcome all of those different ways of participating and being a part of this movement with us.
Totally. Totally. Savannah, thank you. Thank you. We kept that in within the hour. I know that we're going to be chatting a lot more in South Africa. I can't wait to see you in Joburg. And
Yeah. Great.
we will put everything in the show notes, guys. If you have birth supplies, if you want to make a donation that can be put towards another birth worker or educator or healer of any kind who you know would want to go on this trip, even if you can't make it, please reach out.
Yes.
Savannah is available at Restore Forward on Instagram. You can just message her there, or it's restoreny.org if you'd like to check out the website. And of course, you can always reach out to me at belovedholistics.com. Savannah, thanks again
Thank
for
you
coming
so
and doing
much.
this.
So grateful. See you in a month.
See you in a month.
All right. Peace. Be well.